And again, welcome our new board member, Commissioner Costello. And I'd like to motion on approval of the July 10th, 2018 minutes. Can I get a mover and a seconder?
I'll move it.
Second.
Move to item 3. Okay, ask for a motion to adopt the agenda for September 3rd, 2018. Mover and seconder.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any members here in conflict with any items on the agenda?
No.
Okay, we have number 5. We have two items on the agenda. We get a motion to receive and file for both of them.
So moved. Second.
Okay. And now we have a presentation by the Brunswick Police Commission, Mr. Steve Robert. I'd like to welcome you here, Steve, and thank you for coming and doing a presentation.
We got through consent.
Yep.
Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to anyone who wants to listen to me. Battle. With me this week, we're here for the next day or so. We've got the Commission Board itself, Mr. Tony, our President, Mr. Coleman, Mr. Chaplain, who is now our Vice Chair, and the rest of the members tonight are disposed somewhere else doing something. We appreciate the offer to come in, and anytime the boards change, don't be shy to give us a shout and come back. We don't mind doing this as often as you need to do it, as long as we understand, and everyone understands our mandate, and how important it is for us to be able to do our work with you folks. I'll give you a brief overview, try to make this as quick as possible, so as painless as possible. The Commission's mission statement is really, I summarize it in one simple word or one simple expression: it's to protect the interests of the public, period. Our client is the public. We are always going to step back and say, okay, what does the public expect of us, and what does he expect of law enforcement in our province? So we'll always gauge what we think the public would want in a decision. The role of the New Brunswick Police Commission is to investigate any complaint that we receive from citizens with respect to the conduct of a police officer, the service of the police force, the policies of the police force, or a combination of any one of those three. We'll often get complaints about the conduct of an officer and the service that was provided or was provided. And we investigate, and this is a big ticket item, we investigate any matter relating to any aspect of policing anywhere in the province of New Brunswick. We're given a very large mandate, and it is somewhat challenging sometimes. We view and gauge the adequacy of policing, and everyone, especially you folks after the Fraser study, will sit back and go, well, define adequacy, Steve. And I'll speak to you about that in a few minutes, because we actually are doing something about that. And finally, we ensure consistency in disciplinary actions in the province. What we don't want is one chief taking a very stringent, hard approach on a particular incident and another chief doing something completely different. We want to make sure it's consistent across the province. This, ladies and gentlemen, is not what we want to see, this kind of a relationship between policing and the communities. We like this view, which is a similar community, but the police officers are being protected by their citizenship. We don't want to see any of this, and we haven't, fortunately, here in New Brunswick. We do like to see this sort of thing where the community participates in mourning with the police officers. That's ultimately our goal, is to ensure that the perceptions of policing are always positive. Government New Brunswick agencies, boards, and commissions, you'll see there's a few lines in the red. We function, our commission functions at arm's length from government, which means when somebody's not happy with us, you don't get to write to the Minister of Public Safety. We don't answer to the Minister of Public Safety. We answer to the government in New Brunswick in general. But we are at arm's length. Why? Because we actually have some responsibilities to oversee what the province does with respect to policing. We are independent, I mentioned that. Our members, i.e. the folks you see here, are appointed for terms usually 2 to 3 years, but never exceeding a general total of 10 years. We have rarely seen anybody go to 10-year stint. Currently composed of the chair, Mr. Cormier, a vice chair, Ms. Chaplin, and 3 commissioners. Our chair's position expires on December 5th, 2018, and we are hoping to see an appointment for them. This is the org chart. Ron Cormier at the head, and way on the bottom is young Mr. Robert over here, along with a staff of 2 people. So much like you have Daphne running the entire show, all we have is me and my 2 staff. That's it. 2 to 3 years. We can hold meetings as are required and necessary. Generally speaking, the chair has chosen to have monthly meetings, so our members will speak fairly often. Our meetings are supposedly open to the public, but on the candid with you, we discuss the conduct investigations we have. It's not something I want the public to consume, so we generally will not invite the public into our meetings. We investigate and address complaints, as I said, conduct of a member or municipal regional police force. We provide the complainants, by the way, with any information they need to do their complaint. We often get people coming in saying, well, Constable Rivera did this to me. And we will challenge them as in where, when, why, what, how, and when. And that's what we do to help them. We don't write it for them, but we'll help them make sure they have all the information they're supposed to have. We can refer a complaint, which we generally do, to the chief of police or to a civic authority. The only time we'll be speaking with you folks will be when we get a service or policy complaint against your police force, or if we get a complaint against your chief, or your deputy chief, or your acting deputy chief. That's when you folks will be involved. We have oversight authority on every step of the disciplinary process across New Brunswick. By the way, we deal only with the regional and municipal police forces in New Brunswick. We don't deal with the RCMP. They have their own police commission in Ottawa. But we often get complaints directly from the public about the RCMP, and we just refer them to Ottawa. We confirm or rescind decisions made by the chief and or the civic authorities. We have the final word. You folks make a decision. If we're not in agreement, we'll discuss it with you, but we have the authority to rescind the decision and change it. We can process a complaint ourselves, or we can take over a complaint when it's undergoing. We establish and maintain a list of people who are knowledgeable in investigative techniques. We'll look on our website, you'll find our list of investigators. Generally speaking, they're all ex-cops, ex-crown attorneys, ex-judges, some are politicians, but they're people who've had some experience in investigations. I prefer crowns, to be honest with you, because crowns have got the legal background as well, and a lot of them are ex-cops. We can appoint our own investigator to conduct our investigations, or a chief of police can use our list as well, if they wish. And you can use our list as well, if you decide to do an investigation on the chief, the deputy chief, or a service or policy complaint. You can use our list as well. And we maintain a repository of all disciplinary decisions that are made in New Brunswick. So generally speaking, if a chief up in Bathurst has a corrective measure, we'll note it. And if another chief calls and says, hey Steve, we've got a cop that did this, what is the average type of penalty, what's the average type of corrective measure, we'll usually have a repository of that. We also do some research nationally on any police officers who have been terminated in Canada. And more and more and more, we have a data bank of all officers who are using post-traumatic stress disorder in their defense. It's becoming more and more common. We refer service and policy complaints to you folks, civic authorities. Definitions: civic authority means a board, like you folks, a joint board, or where a board or joint board has not been established, a council. For example, mayor and council is considered a civic authority. Many of the mayors and councils in this province will appoint their CAO as their designate civic authority, meaning, for example, Fredericton, Chris McPherson is their civic authority under the police disciplinary processes. So we refer those to Chris, and he administers them on behalf of the mayor and council. A board means a board of police commissioners. This is an important definition. Police officer. Blah, blah, blah means a police officer. You notice one thing that's missing in this? Police officer does not include a retired former police officer. The minute a member of the police service retires, we lose jurisdiction, and you lose jurisdiction under the Police Act. They're no longer a police officer. Therefore, the Police Act doesn't apply. Breaches of the Code of Conduct, just for your information, discreditable conduct is something like tampering with information. For example, in an exhibit, something goes missing or is contaminated. That's basically discreditable conduct. Neglect of duty, officer decides to leave the area without authorization. I'm just tired of going home. See you. Deceitful behavior, for example, they lie. Improper disclosure of information, for example, they do a CPIC check on a car that's in their ex-wife's or ex-husband's driveway. That's that kind of an offense. Corrupt practice, accepting a bribe. Abuse of authority. Every time a cop seems to arrest some person who's had a previous history with them, all of a sudden this one comes up as an allegation from the person. He abused his authority, he abused her authority, they roughed me up. We get that pretty much so very often. And that one is pretty easy to deal with. Improper use and carry of firearms. On duty, discharge weapon and does not report same. By the way, we've had a lot of accidental discharges in the last couple of months in different police stations, so we're getting a little concerned about that. We haven't had any here, which is nice to hear. But it seems to me the officers are forgetting their basic firearm safety. We're going to have to take a peek at that and see what's going on. Damaged police force property, i.e. they crack up the police car and forgot to tell somebody about it. My guys up in district in the RCMP used to park cars in snowbanks at the end of their shift. In Campbellton, if you know what a snowbank is, it's basically pretty big. They leave the car overnight, the car was warm, it freeze into the snowbank, next morning you get into the car and take off, you leave the bumper behind. Well, as long as somebody reported that they left the bumper behind, I was okay with it. But this could be that sort of thing. Misuse, intoxicating drug, liquor, or drugs. This one is specific to somebody reporting for duty intoxicated. Convicted of an offense, someone who's found guilty of a crime or statute offense. Often you'll have officers who are criminally involved in something, for example, drinking and driving, they get stopped. This would be one of the allegations that shows up under the Police Act investigation. Because once and if they're convicted, it automatically becomes a sustained allegation under the Police Act. And insubordinate behavior, refuses to follow an order from his or her superior. I know this happens daily. I know it happens often, but it's up to the chiefs to decide how stringent they want to deal with this. They can deal with this under the Police Act. It doesn't mean you have to every single time. Party to a breach asks the colleague to lie for him or her. And workplace harassment becoming more and more prevalent in law enforcement. And we're dealing with this a lot more often. Not here, but elsewhere. So, someone decides to make a complaint and sends it to the chief or to you guys, the civic authority, directly. Basically what happens here is you or the chief has to send it to us after they categorize it, meaning the chief gets the complaint, you get the complaint, you look at it and you say, yeah, it's conduct. Dear Police Commission, this is a conduct complaint that we will be administering, or we would like you to consider. We then decide whether or not we're going to keep it. We rarely do. More likely we'll send it right back to the chief and say, Chief, where you go, deal with it, or if we keep it, we'll do the investigation. Rarely do we like to keep them. Public complaint comes straight to the commission, happens very often. Again, there we decide, we categorize it. What is it? Service conduct policy. And then we either send it back to the chief or we deal with it ourselves. So we can get complaints directly to our office, which we do a fair bit of. Now, once the complaint is received, the chief or you folks can look at it and say summarily dismissed right off the bat. That's vexatious, frivolous, it's made in bad faith, I'm summarily dismissing it. Or you realize, okay, maybe this one has got a bit of grounds to it. Constable Robert, did you tell him to go pound salt? Yes, I did. What were you thinking? I'm really sorry, Chief, I shouldn't have done that, and I'll tell him I'm sorry. Sir, he's willing to apologize, is that acceptable? Yeah, okay, Roberge, call so-and-so, apologize, yeah, that's good. You happy, sir? Yeah. You happy, constable? Yeah, okay, informally resolved. Happens often, which is, I prefer to see them go informal resolution than anything more. If you can. Sometimes you can't. If it can't be resolved either these two ways, then over here is an investigation that has to take place. And in your chief's case, he has a professional standards officer that does most of the investigations. Does a great job. We're very happy with his performance. And from there, that always helps. There. If the chief decides that they're going to summarily dismiss it, we get to review it. If we agree with the summary dismissal, then fine, we confirm the decision and we go. If we don't agree, we'll generally tell the chief, sorry chief, we don't agree with this being summarily dismissed. We're going to ask you to proceed to investigating this. If the chief decides to do an informal resolution on it, we get to look at it and say, yeah, well, yeah, chief, I think that's a good way of doing it. Good enough. Or, sorry chief, we don't agree with an informal resolution. Please conduct an investigation. If, after the chief investigates it, he comes back and says, no, I'm not doing anything else, it's not sustained, therefore there's no further action, we'll look at it, we'll review it, we'll review the investigative report, and we'll say, yeah, we agree, or we don't agree. And we think you should go to a settlement conference on this. We think the allegations are sustained and should be sustained, so go to a settlement conference. A settlement conference is nothing more than a chief sitting with their officer and having a chat. Simple as that. And trying to find a solution to the misconduct. Corrective measure. If the officer says no, too bad, I'm not interested, chief. And the chief, or let's do the opposite, the chief and the constable come to an agreement and say, yeah, corrective measure is going to be that. We can confirm that when we write to us and say, yeah, okay, we agree with that, chief. Or after a 30-day period, a 30-day grace period, we can rescind the decision and we can send it back to the chief and say, hey chief, did you consider this as a potential corrective measure? Or, sorry chief, what we're getting from you is you're not really dealing with this one the way we think you should. We're going to send you straight to an arbitration. I, in my term here, have not used this once. The chiefs and I and the board always speak before a settlement conference. We're always usually right on the same one. Yeah, you know what, Steve, I think I should do this, I should do that. Generally speaking, they're not too far off. So I rarely have to use that kind of an exercise with the board. Arbitration hearing. Let's say nothing works and the officer and the chief can't come to an agreement on a corrective measure, then guess what? They're going to an arbitration hearing. Unfortunately. Very expensive, very time consuming, and very stressful for everybody, including the chief. Have an arbitration hearing. An arbitrator decides on the balance of probabilities. You know how in criminal law we all say proven until, guilty until proven, innocent until proven guilty. In civil law, it's balance of probabilities. In this process of an arbitration, it's also balance of probabilities. For the laypersons in the world, to me, it's, I believe, 51%. I'm convinced 51% that person did it. In this arbitration hearing, a lot of things are admissible, including hearsay evidence. It's pretty laissez-faire. It's got a lot of flexibility in the process. But, again, the entire arbitration is run by an arbitrator. And that person has the final word. Yes and no. I'll be honest with you, we've had a couple arbitrations where the arbitrator decided to terminate the employee. The employee took the arbitrator to a judicial review. The court basically looked at it. In one case it said, yeah, the arbitrator was right, and you are terminated. And in another case, looked at it and said the arbitrator was wrong, and you're reinstated. When that happens, we can then take it to the Court of Appeals, which the commission did in one case and got it reversed. So the officer was terminated again. And there's one that's understanding right now and belongs to somebody else, and we're just waiting to see what the court's going to decide. The purpose of the corrective measures is to correct and educate. the member that's involved in the infraction. I often get challenged by certain organizations to say, well, where's the corrective measure, Robert, in firing somebody? The corrective measure is maybe they shouldn't have been a cop, and firing them is the right solution. That's the correction. And the education is, I guarantee you, every other cop that saw this happen, and the arbitration isn't going to do it. That's the correction and the education when it comes to terminating an employee. Rare, very rare. Unfortunately, in this province, we've had to do it in the last little while too often, but it's rare. The corrective measures a chief has to deal with are the following. A verbal reprimand, which is don't do that again. A written reprimand, which is don't do that again in writing. Counseling or treatment, and this could be combined with a written reprimand or a verbal reprimand. Special training or retraining, i.e. you can't drive with beans, so we're going to send you back to driving school. Work under close supervision. So after you've done all this, you're going to come back to work, constable, and you're going to be working directly with your sergeant for 6 months. That just gives the chief that little extra reassurance that it's not going to repeat itself. This is the bigger one, suspension without pay. Any time period there. And finally, reduction in rank and dismissal. Reduction in rank can be a constable going back to the first to the fourth class. So you're basically bringing them down in pay. Or dismissal. A little bit of the law portion of the presentation. The New Brunswick Police Act under Section 25(9) says that every civic authority, when you're making a decision on eliminating a police position, you have an obligation to get the Commission's approval. It's under law. It says it right there in the Act. You must seek the Commission's approval before eliminating a position. And all that we wanted the Commission to hear from you when you're deciding to eliminate a position is a business case. I'm a former director of finance for the RCMP, so I've got a big financial background, but usually when you get your business case, I'll sit down and look at this and say, makes sense. They can't afford them. Chief, what do you think? And I'll be talking to the chief about it. You get the chief's reassurance that they can operate. The only thing that the Commission is going to ask you to do if you decide to eliminate a position is tell us what services you are changing that the police deliver. Because if you're telling us you're reducing your police force, you better tell us that you're getting services reduced as well too. And you expect that there will be a certain service that's not there anymore. I.e. a community constable is going to be removed, fine, and which community storefront is being shut down. That kind of a logic is what we're looking for. The municipality shall budget the necessary monies, blah, blah, that's in the Police Act. The civic authority shall, in consultation with the chief of police, establish the priorities and objectives of the police force. I don't need to talk to you guys about this because you do it all the time. Your chief's sitting right here tonight. That's consultation. You're talking to your chief. Believe it or not, there are municipalities in New Brunswick that don't talk to their chief. And their chief doesn't talk to them. To the point where public safety has had to write into Organization 1.2 the policy that police forces shall formally consult with the community every 4 years at a minimum to identify community needs. That's in your police standards. So for public safety to have to actually read this and to tell a municipality and the chief, you got to talk to each other, that scares me a little bit. But there are communities that I was surprised to find are not talking to their chief, and their chief's not talking to them. Not your issue here, obviously. Chief of police shall report directly to the civic authority. I put that in question marks because I actually had one chief who they were trying to create a director of public safety for that chief to report to and not to the civic authority. The Brunswick Police Act says clearly you will, chief, report to the civic authority, not to somebody else. That's in the Police Act as well. The police chief shall report directly to the civic authority in respect to operations. Now, I know you guys deal with administrative issues in your chief all the time. Chiefs also have all the powers necessary to manage and direct the police force. I've discovered a few chiefs who had no say over their hiring. It's the chief of police. They're the ones who get to decide which ones are their cops and not. But it was an HR department that got to decide who got hired for the chief. Well, that's not the way it should work. has to have the power to decide who their team is going to be. They can work in consultation with the HR department, but the chief has the final word. Cost of an arbitration hearing, oh Lord. Chief of police or civic authority, as case may be, okay, when they're dealing with an arbitration, a chief of police can require the union to pay half the costs. Police Act says that can happen. It's up to the chief and to the civic authority to decide if they want to do that, but they can split the costs. If the commission takes over an investigation, or if the commission decides to keep an investigation, it says it shall pay all the costs of the arbitration hearing unless there's a negotiated agreement, as we know here in St. John. The budget for the New Brunswick Police Commission isn't very large. On average, it's about $367,000, $350,000. The big ticket item, the yellow, is broken down further over here. The big ticket item for the yellow is basically this stuff, legal services. We don't have lawyers on staff. We outsource our lawyers. So anytime we need a legal opinion, anytime we need a legal representative, any kind of a process, it costs us big bucks. Average cost $400 an hour. So choose away the budget. Our budget is given to us by the Department of Public Safety. However, the Department of Finance and I have a very nice understanding, which is I'm just a small ticket. $350,000 is not a very big ticket item in the big budget of the province, so they basically tell me stick to your budget as much as you can. If you go over, let us know where it is, and we'll try and help you out, and they have always helped me out. So I'm very happy with the Department of Finance. Adequacy of policing. There's that word again, adequacy of policing. The New Brunswick Police Act says the Commission can investigate and assess the adequacy of the police force, any police force in the province, and the RCMP. And it can determine if municipal, regional, and RCMP forces offer adequate services, and if the municipality and the province are ensuring adequate responsibilities and adequate policing. So they gave us this huge mandate to say, you guys make sure the province is doing adequate policing. But nobody ever stopped to say what adequate meant, as we know. Simon Fraser decides adequate policing is cop to pop. Well, that's not what it is. It's more than just that. There's a whole bunch of other stuff. And taking your territory and saying, well, from here to there in the greater St. John area, and the cop to pop says you guys are overstaffed, well, everybody found the deficiencies in that report, didn't we? So we sat back at the commission and we said, no, we better do something about that. One of the things we can do in the New Brunswick Police Commission is we can take on an investigation at the request of the civic authority or the minister. So if the minister Landry comes along and says, hey, Police Commission, we want you to investigate this, we can take that. Or if we decide that we want to look at something, we can do it as well too. We have the mandate to start something on our own mission. And we conduct hearings, public hearings to do so. And you remember the shipping and the police force. Back in 1985, when things were really not going well in Shippigan, and there was infighting, and the chief and the members were at each other, videotaping each other off duty, on duty, laying accusations left, right, and center. Well, the commission basically had public hearings on it, called in everybody to testify, and then when we were finished the hearings, we made recommendations to the minister to disband the Shippigan police force. And they are no longer a police force. This is my jargon, of course. I believe it should be independent, impartial, confidential, and create investigative processes, incredible investigative processes. This is the roles and responsibilities of me, my position, and the board of directors. The board of directors deal with strategy and long-term commitment. My job is day-to-day operations. Chairman's role, my job description, and questions. Don't be shy with questions relative to your police force. Speechless, that's perfect. I like that.
You're there, you did a good job.
No, I'll take the speechless part.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Roberts? Going once?
Thank you.
So,
Anyway, thank you very much, Mr.
quite
Rivera.
welcome, like I said, anytime you folks want us back to talk about this, if you get new board members and you want us to do this, I don't mind coming down and doing a one-on-one as well too. We have more-
Can we get a copy of this?
Absolutely. Daphne, I'll send you a copy, those slides. Thanks, folks, appreciate us being in here.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to meet you.
Thank you, sir. Pleasure. Thanks again, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Is that the last one open or do we?
Okay,
Yeah,
2939.
Okay.
Yeah, yes, okay. Okay. Continue on here.
Sure.
Okay, item 9. 9.1, internal monthly report.
Move, receive, file.
9.2, overtime.
Sorry,
Oh, sorry.
before we second move and file, is that this not the one the chief was saying you do not want the second page of this?
No, this is 9.4.
Oh, 9.1, I thought. Am I in the wrong spot?
No, the one that he handed us.
9.1.
9.1.
What were you just receiving in file, 9.1?
Right.
That's got the second page that we do not
It
want.
doesn't have.
No, it doesn't in this report.
Yes, it
Yes,
does.
it does.
Yes, it does,
I
yeah.
apologize, yeah.
We want to amend that report before we receive and file,
Yes,
to just have page
Page
1.
1.
yeah.
Correct.
Good catch.
Right.
Sorry,
Very
apologize,
good
yeah.
catch.
It's okay.
Okay, motion to amend
So-
9.1.
Yeah, so the motion would be that just the first page of 9.1 be included in the open minutes.
I'll move that.
Second.
Thank you.
Overtime, 9.2, overtime report to time expense.
No questions?
Motion to receive and file. Did everybody look it over already? Any questions?
No.
Motion to receive and file.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
9.3, overtime hours, utilization reports. Any questions on the overtime hours? Motion to receive and file.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
And the, what was it, 1.6? Highlights of the, okay, 9.4 was previously 1.6 in the closed session. Highlights of monthly activity report. Any questions on that?
No questions?
I
Motion
guess
to
since
receive.
no one else is here, we might as well just receive it, I guess.
Yeah. Motion to receive and file. And one other thing that we have to
Somebody
take.
second it?
I'll second it and just say thank you for the report, Chief. It's a very interesting dashboard of activities. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and one other thing that's not on here, Daphne reminded me, we need a motion to pay the police commission the
But
39.
No, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We're gonna
Hold on.
It has to be.
adjourn and go back into.
Oh, it has to be, okay,
So you
okay,
have to adjourn this thing.
okay. So do we have a motion here to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.